Coming up, the left, the right, and the impartial come together against a privatized ATC.
A new feature that will change your flight planning forever.
Honoring the Tuskegee Airmen and flying a one-of-a-kind float plane. AOPA Live this week begins in just a moment. AOPA is just saying no to user fees. Hello everyone and welcome to AOPA Live this week. I'm Melissa Rudinger.
And I'm Tom Haynes. Thanks for joining us. AOPA is standing firm in opposition to user fees. That's as the FAA reauthorization bill has now moved from the committee to the House floor.
That bill, also known as H.R. 4441, the Aviation Innovation, Reform and Reauthorization Act, would put user fees on some Part 135 general aviation charter operators.
Well, the bill is on the floor and we've still got a lot of work to do with it. There are some good things. First off, remember the third class medical, which we think is the most important thing to grow general aviation near term, is in that bill as a bit different than the Senate version, but it is going forward somewhere there. There are things that we are still very uncomfortable with, and namely that is the word user fees. Even though Part 91, private aviation, is protected, we're not comfortable at all with the language that includes 135 as a way for it to start. And so therefore we have announced our really unhappiness with the way it's articulated right now. And we believe the 135 user fee language has to go away.
The bill was amended in committee to make it more palatable to general aviation, including an amendment from Representative Sam Graves of Missouri. He increased the number of general aviation representatives on the Air Traffic Control Board, but in the end, the inclusion of general aviation user fees was too much for Graves and Representative Todd Rokita of Indiana.
Mr. Rokita. No. Mr. Rokita votes no.
Representatives Rokita and Graves voted against the bill, as did all of the Democrats on the committee.
There's a lot of controversy in a major bill like this. The one thing that I think we all agree on, we'd like to see the FAA behave a little differently, have some accountability. Remember, just 20 years ago, the budget was $5 or $6 billion, and now it's approaching $16 billion with 20% fewer flights in their national airspace. So it does appear there's ways to run this agency better and with more support, with a longer term view of next gen and how it gets implemented at lower costs. So that's what keeps our eyes and ears open. What else could we do to help this thing move along? Now, it's very controversial, and I think some parts of this thing will go forward, and other parts of it certainly won't.
It's not often that both the right and the left agree on something, but in the case of air traffic control privatization, hostile fire is coming from both conservatives and liberals. As we mentioned, 2 Republicans and all of the Democrats on the Transportation Committee voted against the bill. Now the left-leaning New York Times is editorializing against the plan. The editor said there is no evidence a privately operated system would be better and plenty of reason to believe it would be worse. They objected to giving $53 billion worth of facilities and equipment to the nonprofit corporation, things the taxpayers have already paid for.
And fire from the right. The conservative Heritage Action Group, which is affiliated with the Heritage Foundation, blogged that a privatized air traffic control organization might become like other government-sponsored enterprises that keeps taxpayers on the hook for serious missteps. And the plan could result in double taxation on airline passengers. Heritage Action wants Congress to remove bureaucratic control over air traffic control and go to what it calls true privatization.
Good news for drone and RC aircraft operations around Washington, D.C. Unmanned aircraft can now resume flight in the outer ring of the Special Flight Rules area. The outer ring is 15 to 30 miles around D.C. The entire 30-mile radius was deemed a no-drone zone last year. UAS flight is still prohibited within 15 miles of Reagan National Airport. You can find out more about current drone regulations at knowbeforeyoufly.org.
And something to help keep you out of those no-fly zones, there's some truly amazing new features to the AOPA online flight planner powered by Jeppesen. AOPA Live's Paul Harrop shows you how the free online member benefit can now take all the guesswork out of planning fuel stops.
The fuel planning is going to be awesome.
That's no exaggeration.
And what it allows you to do is if you're planning a long cross-country flight where you're going to need a fuel stop, part of the problem has always been, where am I going to stop for fuel? You have to consult the nav log and start looking at how much fuel you're going to have. It's different areas of the trip. Well, now we've actually have the ability to color code the route line based on where you're going to have 60 to 90 minutes of fuel and then where you're going to have less than 60 minutes of fuel.
Add that to the previous feature of showing fuel prices along the route, and you can go right to the yellow segment, find the best deal, pick your fuel stop, bam, 30 seconds, you've made a solid decision. But it goes beyond that.
That color coding we place on the route line does two things. Number one, it includes the winds aloft forecast. So as long as there's a valid winds aloft forecast, it's going to evaluate what the winds are going to do to your trip, and it's going to adjust that color coding accordingly. And second, it also does include calculations based on your fuel required to climb to altitude and then the fuel required to descend.
But the new features don't stop there. There's always been a bit of a disconnect between online flight planning and your EFB actually in the airplane. Well, not anymore. You can email your nav log to yourself with the click of a mouse. And in the email,
so we've created an integration with two of the more popular EFBs out there, ForeFlight Mobile and WingX Pro, where when you email your route to yourself, that email will contain links. You just tap on the appropriate link, and you can then open that route up in that EFB as long as it's installed on the device you're viewing the email on.
And if you're on Android using Navigator, your flight plans and nav logs will be natively in the app. There are more integrations with other popular EFBs in the works. Paul Harrop, AOPA Live.
Thanks, Paul. Some really clever features there. The flight planning products team is working on even more features for future releases. AOPA Online Flight Planner is powered by Jeppesen, and you'll be able to select features you want at the airports that show up in the planner, like rental cars or restaurants, for example. AOPA members can access the tool for free right now at aopa.org/AIFP.
Coming up after the break, Black aviation history from a first-hand account. We visited with the Tuskegee Airmen.
It's big, it's bold, and it's one of a kind. Flying the Hamilton H-47 metal plane. You're watching AOPA Live this week.
From your first skyward glance, the dream of flight compelled you. And from your first glimpse of a Cirrus, you realized that dream had a name. Cirrus Aircraft. Go where you've never been before.
Welcome back. You're watching AOPA Live this week. There's a new tool you can take advantage of to avoid a misfueling incident.
When you think about fuel for your airplane, you usually think about how much to add. But that's not the only thing you need to pay attention to. There has been an uptick in misfueling incidents in the last few years.
Just as an example, this is a mixture of, if you can see this, a 50-50 split between Jet A and 100 low lead. You can see it looks just like 100 low lead because it's blue. And so AOPA Air Safety partnered with NATA to produce a training video for pilots so they could help prevent misfuelings. But we took it a step further. We also have a refueling safety card that pilots can use to give to their line person, give to the customer service representative to make sure they get the right kind of fuel in the right amounts in the right tank so they can be safe.
The fuel cards are meant to be like business cards. You write how much you want in each tank and other instructions. The cards have your tail number, contact information, and the correct fuel for your airplane. The cards are available at cost through our partner, Vistaprint. You can order them at aopa.org/fuelcards. February is Black History Month, a chance to learn about the brave pilots who fought for civil rights. AOPA invited one of the Tuskegee Airmen to share his story at the National Aviation Community Center. AOPA Live's Josh Cochran has the story.
Around 100 people are gathered at AOPA's National Aviation Community Center to hear firsthand the incredible story of the Tuskegee Airmen. These brave men played a major role in the fight for equal opportunity in the military. Before World War II, black servicemen were not allowed to be military pilots. This policy came from a research study done by the Army War College.
In the process of evolution, the American Negro has not progressed as far as the other subspecies of the human family. As a race, he has not developed leadership qualities. His mental inferiority and inherent weaknesses of his character are factors that must be considered with great care in the preparation of any plan for his employment in war.
Despite the report, the military needed men and decided to experiment with one black squadron.
Mechanics began training at Chanute Field, Rantoul, Illinois. Army thought they were going to fail. They didn't.
Pilots started training in Tuskegee, Alabama at a separate airfield. The training was successful, but the airmen still had to prove themselves.
They had a study done and found out their bombs on target was equal to the other squadrons, so stay in combat.
The airmen were incredibly successful in World War II, winning the respect of military leaders. The end of the war started to bring positive change to the military.
Pittsburgh Courier came up and said this is a double V program. What that meant was, victory against Hitler in Europe and victory against racism here at home.
The process took years and a lot of perseverance, but eventually the Tuskegee Airmen and the rest of the military was desegregated and sent around the world.
They said this: we need to use people based on their training and experience, not happenstance of birth or color of their skin.
After his 136 missions in World War II, Colonel McGee went on to fly in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. He had a total of 409 missions, more than almost any other military pilot. In 1972, Colonel McGee became the first black officer to command a military base in the United States. At age 96, McGee shares his story and the story of the Tuskegee Airmen to inspire the next generation.
It's not so much me, but it's the value lessons that sustained us are still important for people and for our young people today. They're going to be, first you must be a servant of all, but that means helping those coming along behind. Don't turn your back on those in need. But you see, the reason that's important, what's happening 20 years from now, it's what you're doing.
Josh Cochran, AOPA Live.
Wow, what a remarkable man and a really inspiring story. Thank you so much, Josh, for bringing it to us. If you want to see the rest of Colonel McGee's talk, you can find it at aopalive.org.
Mooney is updating its top-of-the-line M20 Acclaim and Ovation models. New features include a pilot side door and a keypad flight management system for the Garmin G1000. The models also have updated interior and exterior styling. Unchanged is the fast, efficient cruise speed you'd expect from a Mooney. The Acclaim has a top speed of 242 knots, while the Ovation is in at 190 knots.
Finally this week, a one-of-a-kind airplane makes a splash around the Pacific Northwest.
Barry Schiff and photographer Mike Pfizer tell us the story of one man's dedication to his Hamilton H-47 metal plane on floats.
If you were going to pick a place to be introduced to a 1929 Hamilton metal plane on floats, the most appropriate place would seem to be Kenmore Air on the northern tip of Seattle's Lake Washington. Their fleet of beavers and otters, that just seems to set the mood perfectly. The metal plane was the brainchild of aviation genius Thomas Hamilton, a high school dropout who later became famous for his Hamilton Standard propellers. The gentleman on the wing checking the fuel load is Howard Wright, proud owner of this, the only flyable metal plane in the world. He was particularly attracted to the Hamilton because of its unique historical significance.
Its history on floats is what attracted me to the airplane. I'm a float plane pilot first and foremost, and its uniqueness and rareness is why I was interested in acquiring the airplane. It was an early airplane, 1929, as the manufacturers were transitioning from fabric and wood aircraft to all metal aircraft. And the fact that it had pilots and passenger compartment all inside, it was sort of a luxurious airplane. So its historical relevance was attractive to me. It was the first airplane to fly from North America to Asia, or that is between Alaska and Siberia, first round trip ever by Noah Wien. It had a lot of historical significance to me.
When Wright purchased this beautifully restored airplane in 2010, it was on wheels. But being an avid seaplane pilot, he wanted also to fly the airplane on floats. This led to an exhaustive search for a pair of very rare floats. The story of how he obtained them is a great lesson in how to make a deal.
We found out the floats had been buried in a snowbank behind the hangar in Fairbanks after 30 years, and we decided that these were the original matching serial number floats to this airplane from 1929. So we negotiated with the seller, and our parts manager here called him and said that we'd like to buy the floats, and the seller came out with a very high price, and he was quite confident in his price and said, you know, we think that these rare floats are worth every single penny. They're the only pair of floats left in the world for that airplane, and I've got them here. And our parts manager said, we're sure they're worth something, but I've got the only buyer for those floats, so let's make a deal. They did. As a float plane driver, you need to be able to be nimble, get out of the seat quickly, get on the float, have a line in your hand, and be prepared to dock the airplane. This airplane, having been built in 1929, only has one door, and it's aft. So you have to go through the cabin, past all the seats, through the door, down the ladder, and onto the float. It takes practically a landing crew, which is what they may have been used to back in the day, but normally we're all a little bit self-sufficient here than back then. My plans for the airplane are to keep using it, enjoy the Pacific Northwest and Southeast Alaska, just keep it well preserved, well maintained. It's an honor and a privilege to be the present steward of this airplane. I'm sure there will be others after me.
Clear. Clear.
When headed into the wind and ready for takeoff, you hold the elevator fully aft while advancing the throttle to 1900 RPM and 32 inches. Gradually release back pressure as the big airplane rises onto the step. The Hamilton lifts off at 70 miles an hour and climbs out at 80. There is nothing graceful about this large, rugged workhorse, and it seems more demanding than other large singles of its era. And it's not particularly responsive to the controls, especially in roll. Frequent and substantial aileron input is needed to keep the airplane on an even keel. Leading turns with rudder seems to help keep the ball centered. While looking over and between 3 of the radial engine's 9 cylinders, you make the approach at 80 miles an hour. And the Hamilton slides onto the water at 65. Ah, the joy of flying a seaplane. Barry Schiff, AOPA Live.
Thanks, Barry. Great story. What a remarkable airplane. You can read more about the metal plane in the January issue of AOPA Pilot Magazine. So that's one that I did not know much about the metal plane at all. I'd heard of it, but it's a really fascinating story.
It's fascinating. It sounds like it's a challenge to fly.
Yeah, it really does. That's it for this week. Join us again next Thursday for another AOPA Live This Week. I'm Tom Haynes.
And I'm Melissa Rudinger. We hope to see you next time.